Perhaps no villain in Buffy the Vampire Slayer was as complex and tragic as Dark Willow. She was one of the most iconic villains in pop culture because of her status as a tragic figure. But today, I'm going to make a case for why, of all the big bads in the Buffy series, Dark Willow is the only one who wasn't truly evil. Some villains were much scarier than Dark Willow. Some were literal gods, and some were part of the original evil that preceded recorded history, and they were all pure evil. But Willow wasn't. And as I make my case, I hope to also show you how she had one of the best character arcs in TV history. Faith and Spike both had exceptional character arcs, as both had tragic backstories, spent time as a series villain, and struggled with redemption. Both characters had to wrestle with their own inner demons, and we often felt their pain and cheered on their more heroic moments. But Willow stands out for several reasons. First of all, because, well, she's Willow. Willow is the only character not named Buffy Summers who is in every episode of the series. She's nerdy, adorable, and a fan favorite. Willow has her haters online for sure, but they're in the minority. So how and when did Willow go from this to this? There are many fan theories. Some think it started in season 6. I see on a few social media platforms that there's fans out there who think they ruined Willow this season because her actions seemed to be so different than previous seasons. I completely disagree with that point of view, as really the only thing season 6 did was make Willow's trajectory more obvious. The two-part season finale of the second season is cited by many as the real origin of Willow's darkness, and there's some excellent reasoning behind this. Willow was barely introduced to magic and curses and had only assisted in performing spells, but in the finale she attempts a highly advanced spell, and it's the first time we see the darkness that was to come. So the darkness may have begun there, but in order to truly understand how Willow went from nerdy best friend to a villain hell-bent on destroying the world, you need to look at who Willow is at heart. In my opinion, her true villain arc actually started earlier than the season 2 finale. In fact, I say it started right here, season 1, episode 1. Let's take a closer look at who Willow was when we first met her. From the first time we see Willow, she's a shy, bookwormish nerd with the self-esteem of a puddle. Throughout the first season, we see how insecure she is. Zero confidence, no sense of self-worth. She's bullied, awkward, and taken advantage of. She's initially shocked when Buffy befriends her, and she clings to Buffy and Xander for the self-validation she needs. Willow's parents largely ignore her and treat her at best like some psychology experiment they got bored with. She's left to fend for herself, and much of her inferiority complex stems from this neglect. Willow seeks validation from her parents but never receives it. Her mother is aloof, indifferent, and completely disinterested in her daughter. What Willow deeply needs in her life and doesn't receive is unconditional love. This is largely why when she meets Buffy, she goes all in on the fight against the supernatural threats of Sunnydale. She finally feels useful. She feels wanted, and this gives her the validation she craves. Being part of the group becomes an obsession for her. She gets that needed boost to her self-esteem. And over time, it goes from good intentions to, well, where good intentions tend to lead. Willow is studious and bright, but is insecure, and she wrestles with her self-loathing. Xander and Buffy find her sweet and adorable, but Willow doesn't see that about herself. She feels beneath everyone else. She's the living embodiment of imposter syndrome. She's always acting as though she's moments away from being exposed as a fraud and then rejected and shunned by her few friends. In season 2, Willow meets Jenny Calendar and is influenced to move toward powers found outside of school books. For the next while, we see Willow walking the tightrope between established bookworm and novice witch. Willow's villain arc began back in the first episode of the series, but as I mentioned, her dark path truly began in the two-part season finale of season 2, when she cast that curse to re-ensoul Angel. She receives mixed messages from Giles on performing the curse. In episode 21, he says, Willow, channeling such potent magics through yourself, it could open a door that you may not be able to close. In hindsight, we can see he was completely right. But then, that same day, he hands her the Orb of Thessaly in order to perform the very spell he's warning her against. She needs to cast the spell from her hospital bed as she's still recovering from head trauma when she was crushed under a bookcase. In her weakened state, she attempts the high-level spell. We see her struggling to get the words of the curse out. And then something unsettling happens. She looks like she was possessed and began speaking Romanian quickly and accurately. The spell worked, albeit belatedly, but she was hooked. Willow's new obsession was magic, and her friends just let her run with it because it was helpful to what they wanted to accomplish. They didn't see the early signs of addiction. The spell was way beyond what she could safely handle, but it did somehow work. However, Oz and Cordelia saw that she was clearly possessed, and Willow even later said she could feel the dark energy going through her. And despite all of that, not one of her friends was the least bit concerned. As I mentioned, Willow's identity is in her usefulness. So when she starts to learn magic, she's obsessed with it. Every spare moment she has is to become useful, powerful, someone her friends need, because if they need her, they won't abandon her. We get some excellent foreshadowing in season 3 when we see Willow levitating a pencil and she says, it's all about emotional control. And then what happens? The pencil flies off and embeds itself into a tree trunk. This is a sign of what's to come, as it's exactly that lack of emotional control that leads to Dark Willow. Also in season 3, she's messing around with darker magics with Anya, a vengeance demon disguised as a high school student, and it brings Vampire Willow into our world. There are fatalities, but nobody gets after Willow for helping with this spell. In season 4, her boyfriend Oz cheats on her twice in the same episode, tries to hide it from everyone, dumps Willow, and leaves town. She's devastated, but nobody seems at all interested in helping her through her heartbreak. Anya can't wait for Willow to get over it. Giles says she will get over it and take the time to scold her for letting her pain get in the way of her duties in the fight against evil. And Buffy knows Willow is hurt, but has no clue about the extent of her pain. Willow spirals emotionally and starts messing with some pretty serious magic, well beyond her readiness. In season 4, her increasing magic use is used mainly for humor, which can make us miss the fact that the emotional damage to her is very real. And as her power grows, she grows more unstable. From episodes 6 through 9, Willow is in a bad place, both mentally and emotionally, and was already playing around with magic she wasn't ready to handle. She walked out in front of a speeding car, and when she was rescued at the last second, she didn't react. There was no alarm, no fear, no surprise. If anything, she seemed disappointed. It was as if she wanted to get hit as a way to stop the pain she was feeling. We do see this again in late season 6, but we'll discuss that later. But by this point in season 4, Willow was on the brink of a complete emotional breakdown. Buffy was supportive for a whole 2 episodes, and then she assumed Willow was dealing with it. And so did Giles. But when Willow told Xander, her best friend since childhood, about her pain, he was completely dismissive, saying, "We all have pain, Will." She desperately needed the unconditional love and support of her friends to help her get through it. And it's made clear in the writing and dialogue that all her friends want her to just get over the pain on her own and go back to being helpful. So she's left to cope with all of the emotions and pain on her own. Only Spike noticed Willow's desperate state of mind. When Buffy says she thinks Willow is dealing with it, he says, "Are you people blind? She's hanging on by a thread. Any ninny can see that." Willow has had a hard time staying emotionally grounded because she has no support network, and her friends clearly don't know how to be supportive. As season 4 progresses, we see just how much stronger Willow is becoming with magic. She was about to cast a hex on Oz for their relationship issues. She accidentally blinded Giles, and caused Buffy and Spike to plan a wedding together. She called Xander a demon magnet, and then that actually happened. Again, the spell mishaps are mostly played for their comedic value. But look past that, and you can see that Willow is completely unraveling. Willow doesn't stabilize until Tara enters her life, starting in episode 10 of the 4th season. Tara provides a much-needed anchor for Willow and keeps her grounded through the rest of season 4 and through most of season 5. She gives Willow that closeness, lets her feel love again, and helps to guide her in using magic more safely and responsibly. In season 5, when up against a literal god named Glory, Willow teleports her away into the night sky. This is just one example of the power she's now wielding, and we, the audience, are there for it because Willow is fighting the big bad. But as Willow's power grows, so does her instability, and not even Tara can control that. As Willow becomes increasingly impatient with learning magic, she begins using shortcuts, and Tara worries about the power Willow is acquiring. When Glory brain sucks Tara, we see just how important Tara was to Willow's emotional well-being. As their relationship grew, it was the closest Willow had come to feeling the unconditional love she needed. But when Tara becomes incapacitated, Willow makes a rash decision, which would affect her for the rest of the series. In episode 19, Willow reacts to Tara's mind wipe by dosing up on a book full of the darkest magics and goes on a grief-fueled suicide attack on Glory. Willow had flung open that door into darkness Giles had warned her about in season 2, and it can never again be shut. This scene is huge foreshadowing of what was to come for Willow. The black eyes, the dark magic, the thirst for vengeance, the works. And she causes Glory a world of pain, briefly. But Glory withstands Willow's suicidal attack and then nearly kills Willow. And despite all of this, when the episode was over, nobody thought there was a need to talk to Willow about her using dark magic. Once again, her friends, for whatever reason, didn't see any of this as a big deal. In season 5, by episode 21, Buffy was catatonic, and Tara was still incapacitated, so the group was falling apart. Willow steps up and takes charge. That shy, nerdy, soft-spoken girl we first saw is now the assertive one who's giving the orders. And in the scene, you can see everyone, Giles, Xander, Spike, Anya, looking at her with both fear and awe. Willow's orders are immediately obeyed. She was then able to enter Buffy's mind and bring her back from her catatonic state. In the finale, Willow sneaks up on Glory and inflicts some karma on her, brain-sucking the god and restoring Tara's mind. Willow's attack left Glory disoriented, and Buffy was then able to wear Glory down, and then Giles finished the job as his inner Ripper came out. To avert an apocalypse, Buffy sacrificed herself at the end of the season, and that is how season 5 ends. Okay, we need to pause here. In the previous seasons, when Willow cast huge spells, we, the audience, behaved much like her friends did. We cheered her on because she was helping to save the day, but neither we nor her friends took a moment to look at how Willow was being affected and changing due to her magic use. Nobody ever bothered to check in with her. The cumulative damage had been done, and with that in mind, we're ready for the controversial season 6. Buffy's death at the end of season 5 had left the gang struggling to keep up with the fight against the demons and vampires. Willow was in charge of the group, and she decided their only real hope was to resurrect Buffy. She decides to perform a spell to bring her back from the dead, invoking the power of Osiris, the god of the underworld. This was a dangerous, reckless, and utterly irresponsible move. Nevertheless, the spell works, but neither Willow nor anyone else had thought it through. If Buffy comes back to life, where was her body? Yeah, it was still in a coffin 6 feet under, leaving Buffy to have to claw her way out of her own grave, leaving her traumatized. The first time Willow is truly called out is by Giles in episode 4. He sees Willow as being reckless, and he tears a strip off her, in what I think is one of the best acted scenes in the entire series. He says the magics you channeled are more ferocious and primal than anything you can hope to understand, and you are lucky to be alive, you rank arrogant amateur. And Willow responds with a thinly veiled threat. So Giles has become very aware of how far out of control Willow is, and what she's become. And then what does he do after calling her out? He goes back home to England and tells nobody else about what he's observed or what the effects of dark magics have had on Willow. Once again, her friends aren't there for her when she's in a spiral. Now Buffy gets an unconditional pass in season 6 because she was coping with being pulled back to life in Sunnydale and dealing with an enormous amount of trauma. But Xander and the rest of the gang? Even though it was happening right in front of them, they had no clue about what was going on because they were too self-absorbed with their own drama. Willow's addiction to magic only got worse. Pushed to her limit and no longer able to control Willow's worst impulses, Tara ends their relationship. We then see just how alone and desperate Willow feels. In a scene which is both unsettling and heartbreaking, she magically animates one of Tara's outfits just so she can get the hug she desperately needed at that time. Amy comes back into the show and further corrupts Willow and helps to steer her over the metaphorical cliff. Amy introduces Willow to Rack, a black magic sorcerer who will give you a black magic trip for cash. Now the writers were quite heavy-handed here, making Rack's place look like a crack den and his magic trips to resemble a drug high. But it hit the point home that Willow wasn't being evil. She was addicted and out of control. By episode 10, Wrecked, we see things which are probably uncomfortably familiar to anyone who knows someone going through addiction. The addict thinks they're fine and that they have it under control, only to end up hurting others and themselves and having it all fall apart. This episode, a continuation of sorts from episode 9, shows an out-of-control and self-destructive Willow who desperately needs help, and her friends still haven't even noticed. Tara was the only one aside from Giles who saw it. One could argue Spike also saw it, but let's face it, he was going through his own issues, so he didn't care very much. After a disastrous series of events, Willow finally says those 3 words every addict needs to say before starting on the road to recovery. I need help. Once Buffy realized what was happening, she did what all addicts need their friends to do. She helped. She started to support Willow in her recovery. This is a tough episode to watch, but it's when Willow hit rock bottom and finally admitted she needed help. It's a powerful episode. At the end of Wrecked, Buffy tells Willow she doesn't need magic to be special, but Willow disagrees. Don't I? She says. Buffy, who was I? Just some girl. Willow's self-loathing was finally being voiced, and she asks, if you could be plain old Willow or Super Willow, who would you be? She doesn't see herself as having any worth or value without the magic. It's what made her feel special and accepted. That's how she got powerful. So between her deep-rooted insecurities and her magic addiction, she was obsessed with learning until she obtained more power than she could responsibly wield, and it led to her metaphorically imploding. And Buffy and Xander were supportive of Willow's addiction recovery. For 1 episode. By episode 14, Xander and Anya are once again ganging up on Willow to try to pressure her into using magic again. The only person who stands up for her is her ex, Tara, who at this point remains the only person who still has Willow's best interests at heart. But a few episodes later, after a lot of progress in Willow's recovery, Tara takes her back, and they're once again a couple. Which is why in episode 19, when Buffy is shot and Tara is murdered, Willow has a complete and catastrophic breakdown. In episode 20, Willow absorbs 50-plus books of dark magic. She lifted the words off the pages, and they were literally and permanently inside of her. She was ready for a rage-fueled wrath. But it needs to be pointed out Despite all those books she absorbed, she still didn't turn evil. Because at this point, she's still Willow. Despite her thirst for vengeance, her first order of business is to go directly to the hospital and save her best friend's life. Buffy would have died. We were shown that the doctors operating on her were in a losing battle. Willow chose helping Buffy over revenge. This is not the action of an evil person. Once Buffy was saved, Willow began to hunt for the shooter. It's during that 3-episode finale where the big reveal of the season happens. In what I think was a masterstroke of misdirection, we learn that the season's big bad wasn't the trio. And it also wasn't the characters' own inner demons. No, no, no. The big bad of the season was Willow. And it had been all along. When we meet Dark Willow, it's important to remember this isn't some new version of Willow. This is the fully corrupted version of that season 1 character we met and adored. It's the same Willow who is finally reaping the results of her path and her choices. She hunts down Warren Mears, the shooter. She captures him, brutally tortures him, and then flays him alive in what might just be the goriest kill on network television at that time. She then proceeds to hunt down Warren's 2 underlings, who are currently in a jail cell, so that she can murder them next. When Willow goes after the other 2, she discovers that Buffy and Xander aren't on her side. They've broken the 2 out of their cell to prevent their murder. And this is when Willow snaps. That banshee scream in the police station was the moment she passed the point of no return. She went after the 2 anyway, and if her so-called friends, from her point of view, were in the way, then that's just too bad. Willow magically hijacks an 18-wheeler and chases Buffy in a scene reminiscent of the Terminator and tries to ram the car off the road. Buffy escapes and Willow goes back to see Rack, and she kills him as she drains his power and life force to become even more powerful. But Rack is a purveyor of dark magic, and she also absorbs his corrupted and reckless energies as well. Willow had set herself on a path of self-destruction. But not only is her rage intensified, so too is her self-loathing. Notice in the Willow versus Buffy fight, Dark Willow talks about the way Willow views herself. Let me tell you something about Willow. She's a loser. Always has been. She then adds one final point. The only thing I had going for me were moments, just moments, when Tara would look at me and I was wonderful. And that will never happen again. It's clear that Willow has given up on anyone loving or accepting her. She's feeling completely alone and no longer wants to live in the world. Willow defeats Buffy and Anya and comments that with them out of action, there's no one in the world who has the power to stop her now, leading to what I think is the most awesome return of a character in TV history, as Giles shows up and says, "I'd like to test that theory." After a long and destructive magic fight, Giles goads Willow into absorbing his magic in a calculated risk. The sudden surge of light magic connected her to everyone's pain, and it caused Willow to overdose. She could no longer cope with the feelings, and she just needed to end it. Not just her own pain, but everyone's. It was too much for her to handle. Desperate for relief, she decides the only way to stop the pain is to incinerate the earth. Now I need to pause again here because there's another really interesting part. Season 6 was full of the core characters going through hell, feeling alone, isolated, and feeling as though they had no purpose. And yet, starting in that 3-episode finale, they found their purpose again. They needed to work together to find Willow and stop her from destroying herself. They all snap out of their own personal despair and they focus on the big important thing, each other. It's Willow's grief and rage which finally unites the gang. They are finally seeing how much Willow is hurting and the pain she's unable to cope with. Which brings us to Xander. He felt useless all season. He just kept screwing up and took it worse and worse as the season went on. He has no powers, and often feels like he has nothing to offer, but he was the one to finally break through to Willow. He sees the extent of Willow's pain and says what he should have said 2.5 seasons ago. Not, "We all have pain, Will," but something else. He says, "I know you're in pain. I can't imagine the pain you're in." He tells her he loves her no matter what. She indicates she's not afraid to kill him, but he says it doesn't matter. He loves her anyway. No matter how many times she zapped him and threatened him, he responded with love. Xander, who had been an absolute insensitive jerk most of the season, did a lot of growing up in a very short time. Despite his many, many flaws, he has heart and an unwavering willingness to put himself into harm's way. And here in the season finale, he stepped up and brought his best friend back and saved the world while doing so. Willow couldn't bring herself to kill her childhood best friend, and she finally broke. It may be a bit cheesy to have the world saved by the power of friendship, but it really works here. So we have, by the final episode of that season, a completely shattered Willow Rosenberg, who, after 6 seasons, finally has what she's needed her entire life: unconditional love. And with that, she can finally begin to grieve for Tara and to finally become a better person. Had that unconditional love and support been there from the start, Willow's path may have gone a lot smoother. But it's never too late to reach out. It's never too late to start caring for someone in pain. Now, I'm close to wrapping this up, but for all the Willow haters who say she's selfish and doesn't take responsibility, we see in the first episode of season 7 that after Xander brought her back from attempting to destroy the Earth, she surrendered herself to Giles and went to England with him so she could be turned over to the Coven. She truly believed when she arrived there she would be killed, or at least imprisoned forever in some mystical dungeon. This shows us that Willow had become aware of her actions and was willing to accept the consequences. She says to Giles, "I want to be Willow." Now, this is a huge moment many people miss. Willow was the last person she wanted to be her entire life. Her inferiority complex and self-loathing seemed hard-baked into her DNA. And as I've said a few times, she didn't view herself as valuable as a person. But the first time, right here, we hear her say she just wants to be who she is. Throughout season 7, she continued to have trouble controlling the magic as it sometimes controlled her. And this becomes her new challenge on her attempt at redemption. The dark magic is still inside her, but despite her fears of going, well, to use her words, all veiny and homicidal again, she's determined to help her friends and does her best to push through it, even though her spells now have an unsettling blowback effect. But the point is, she grew. She had a cameo on Angel and saved the day. She still went dark, but she was able to pull herself back. And the season and series finale, Willow has to cast the biggest spell she's ever done. She's worried about losing control, so she has a Slayer on hand to kill her if she goes dark. As she's about to invoke the spell, she asks, "You ready to kill me?" But we can see Willow's success as she goes full goddess mode, and it helped to save the day. Without Willow, the fight may have been lost before it started. So there you have it, the one big bad of the show that was never truly evil. She was just a flawed human being full of self-loathing. She didn't need to be defeated. She just needed to be supported. She was a damaged person who needed unconditional love, and she did many horrible things to try to get that. I don't look past the terrible things she did. Many of her actions were completely inexcusable. But at the same time, she was human. We all have a light side and a dark side, and we each must choose which path we walk. Despite it all, Willow eventually chose to walk the path of the light instead of the darkness, and that isn't evil. Feel free to leave a comment below. And thanks for watching.